The Upside is a movie that initially released at the Toronto International Film Festival in 2017, and then it was bought by the Weinstein Company, and they were going to release it, but then Harvey Weinstein got into all that sexual harassment, Me Too trouble, so they sold the movie to this other company, and that company is releasing it now in January of 2019. So this is actually kind of an older movie finally being released. Now, this movie is based on the 2011 French film called The Intouchables, and that movie was very popular. It actually got nominated for a Golden Globe that year for Best Foreign Film, and it also was apparently the highest grossing movie in France in the year it came out. And forgetting all of that, I think its biggest claim to fame is its IMDb score. The initial movie, The Intouchables, has an 8.5 IMDb score, and it actually has the number 40 spot on the IMDb Top 250 movies. So that means, according to IMDb, the initial French movie is the 40th greatest movie ever made. So I don't usually watch foreign films that often, but I'm a big fan of IMDb, and when a movie is that high up on the IMDb Top 250, I watch it. And it was a really good film. And this Upside movie is pissing a lot of people off because they feel that they should not have remade that French film, and they are dumbing it down for American audiences. And they have Kevin Hart, who has arguably never been in a good movie, although I liked him in Jumanji. But so this movie is very controversial, and the IMDb score for The Upside is currently sitting at a 5.9, which is not really fair, but a lot of people are giving this movie like 1s out of 10 without even seeing it because they're so pissed off. If you look at the distribution of scores on IMDb, you can see that there is a lot of 1s here. So there's these two camps, and I get both sides. I don't like people that haven't even seen this movie and give it a 1 because the French film is so superior. But I also don't like people that don't care at all about the French film and hate on that and have no interest in it, when really you should check it out. Okay, so moving past all that, let me get into specifically on this film and trying not to paint it so much with the knowledge of the original. So the plot to this movie is based on a true story of this rich, successful businessman who got into a paragliding accident, and because of this, he became paralyzed. And because he's paralyzed, he has to hire a live-in caregiver to live in his house with him and assist him with doing everything for him. Because he's paralyzed, he literally can't move his arms and his legs. The only thing he can do is like move his face and speak. So he ends up hiring this ex-con. Now, why did he hire this ex-con? You know, he didn't like all these other hoity-toity people that were interviewing to be his caregiver. And when this ex-con showed up, he just showed up because he wanted, his parole officer wanted him to prove that he was trying to get work. So he just wanted a signature saying that he went to an interview. But somehow in the course of the interview, the rich businessman guy, he really kind of grew to liking this ex-con, and he liked that he was different than all the other people and not so reserved. So he ended up hiring this ex-con, and then over the course of the movie and over the course of their lives, they became friends and even grew to like really like each other. So in this movie is directed by this guy, Neil Berger, who did movies such as The Illusionist, Divergent, and Limitless. All not bad movies. This movie is written by this guy, Jon Hartmere, who I don't really know any of his other work. And this movie stars Kevin Hart as like this ex-con guy that becomes this assistant to the rich, successful businessman guy. And I thought Kevin Hart was not bad in this movie. Like, he has to do a lot more dramatic work in this film than he normally does. But I thought he handled that well. And then there are also lots of funny moments where he can shine his comedic abilities, and I thought Kevin Hart did a pretty good job at some of those moments as well. Now, Bryan Cranston plays the rich, successful businessman who is now paralyzed, and Bryan, he's obviously a really good actor, as we've seen him in all of his other work, and he does a really good job in this as like this guy, and you really sort of feel for him as the movie goes on. We also have Nicole Kidman in this as the assistant to Bryan Cranston, who's sort of in charge of hiring this assistant for Bryan. And I love Nicole. I've seen her in a lot of movies recently, and I like her in everything she does. So she was also really good in this. I want to talk about the real life story that this is based on. There's one thing that bothered me in this version, as well as the initial French one, in that they hired this black actor to play the caregiver, when in real life the guy was actually like Arabic, and he basically looked kind of white. So I feel like both of these movies, they're changing history a lot to get a more kind of racially interesting movie, when in reality it was not like that at all. So that always kind of bothered me and felt manipulative and changing the actual true story that it's based on. And by the way, the true story is based on some guy in France, and in the upside they are changing the story to be set in New York City. But nevertheless, moving past that, onto my pros for this movie. So it is very heartwarming seeing these two characters, Bryan Cranston and Kevin Hart, come together and form this friendship. This movie is very funny. It's great seeing Kevin Hart as this like ex-con, and he's entering this fish out of water world of this very rich society. And Bryan Cranston, and also having to care for Bryan Cranston, because like he's not really a caregiver, and all of a sudden he has to pick Bryan up off of his bed and put him in his wheelchair. He has to change Bryan's catheter, so that's like this tube in the penis when he has to pee, and he has to like handle it, and he doesn't do a good job at it, and there's pretty funny moments there. We see them going to the opera, which Kevin Hart's character has never done in his life, but then Kevin Hart's character is introducing Bryan Cranston to like Aretha Franklin, so they're kind of bonding, and some really like fun moments between these two. Also, this movie is just like very inspiring, because you have Bryan Cranston, who's paralyzed, and he doesn't really want to go on. He kind of wants to die. He doesn't want to live his life anymore, but you see him kind of go on and have that like will to live and sort of find happiness in the life he is in now. So I thought that was a pretty good point of the movie. Finally, this movie is just like a very happy, uplifting movie. Like, you will be smiling at the end of this. This movie is just really fun and really uplifting. On to some of my negatives, though. This movie is a little cliche at times. If you've seen the trailer, you can maybe figure out how the whole movie is going to play out. This movie also falls into cultural stereotypes, especially Kevin Hart's character, and they're also calling it like he's falling into that magical black man stereotype, where this black guy enters the life of this white man and kind of changes his life and shows him a new perspective on things, and all of a sudden fixes all of his problems. So there's definitely a little bit of that in this film. I also found it a little bit hard at times to separate Kevin Hart, the comedian, from Kevin Hart, the character he's trying to play in this movie. So sometimes I have a hard time not seeing him as Kevin Hart. Another negative I had was that this movie, while good as like its own standalone story, it really doesn't do that much to separate itself from the original. For those people who have seen the original, there's not much new here. One writer from Variety said, "So little has been done to update or refresh the Intouchables for American culture or a new audience that the upside has no integrity as a separate piece of work." And there is a little bit to that. Like, it is just really a carbon copy of the French film. But mind you, I still highly enjoyed this, and I would give this movie an 8 out of 10. It is really good. Now, I would recommend, if you haven't seen, go watch the original French film. If you have zero interest in the original French film and you don't want to watch a movie with subtitles, then at least watch this, because you're going to get the same story and it's going to be pretty fun. Or watch both of them, but definitely watch one of these movies because you'll have a pretty good time.